everyone. So it's a pleasure to be here. Quick show of hands, who's raising a fund or who has raised a fund? Damn. So this is for you. What Dave asked me to do is to sort of try and compound a bit of the key learnings and the mistakes I've made over the last 10 years and share it with you all. And hopefully you will find that sort of either amusing against me or useful. So first and foremost, I've been doing this for 10 years. Before that, I was a traditional VC for 4 years, and my background actually is, I used to be a computer scientist. I'm completely irrelevant because the technology I've learned way back is no longer sort of really in practice. But I made the switch 14 years ago. And the firm I've built, SoftTech VC, has done roughly 150, to be honest, 152 investments as of today. We've had north of 30 exits, $2 billion in follow-on, and this is my awesome team, Charles Hudson and Stephanie Palmieri, and some of the names that we've backed are here. Not really super relevant to you, but anyway, that's what it looks like, sorry, after 10 years. So we just turned 10 and we celebrated that with our companies and our friends in the industry. That was pretty awesome. And just to put things in perspective, 10 years ago, May 2004, was the early days of Web 2.0. Blogging was the thing that was the most exciting around. And if you remember RSS readers, which allowed you to sort of read RSS feeds at the time, the engagement with the community was leaving comments, and the growth hack that bloggers from the early days were very familiar with was getting a blog post on top of tech meme. Who was doing that? Okay. At the time, seed rounds were much smaller in the 3 to 500K sort of size. Series A's actually were 1 to 2 million. Believe it or not, it actually required a dozen angel and sometimes a couple of funds to get those rounds fulfilled. And when in 2006, someone highlighted the kingmakers of Web 2.0, there was essentially 13 people that were highlighted. And syndicates were actually not based on who could actually add value, and we've heard the term add value a lot since this morning, but basically who you knew. And I remember way back, you had a couple of people in the cap tables who were fillers, so people who knew nothing about tech. They might be surgeons, they might be, God forbid, lawyers, and they would actually invest on the basis of, someone like Ron Conway putting in 100K in the company, and they would do the same. Those days are gone, and those people are no longer sort of investing. And I think founders are actually finding that sort of beneficial. So, and we built our footprint sort of that way, where the first 3 years of my career, I was essentially a business angel, so investing my own money and figuring out what this sort of Web 2.0 thing really was. Then I raised one of the first micro VC funds, which was a small fund, 15 million, in 2007, and then 2011, we announced SoftTech VC3, which was a much larger fund, 55. So the ecosystem, I won't actually spend too much time on because we talked about it since this morning, but as you can see, there's a number of different sort of players that were not here 10 years ago. Whether what's happened at pre-seed, so you now have pre-seed rounds and pre-seed funds, which means very early, you have all the incubators, the accelerators, and so on and so forth. That didn't really exist. Seed funds, the structure that we know and love now, which is extremely busy. The guys from VC Insights mentioned 135 funds. When I started, there was one firm that was truly the pioneer. It was First Round Capital with their first fund, First Round Capital 1. That was the only one sort of in place. The rest was just information. And then the Series A, Series B, which has always sort of been around, but what's new is the fact that you have the public market investors, the hedge funds, the pension funds, the mutual funds sort of investing. And that is sort of new as well, which means there is a lot more choices for founders to actually source their capital. So let's go through that list one at a time. And once again, you could argue this is all BS, and I'm just a schmuck, and take it as it is. That's actually an important point. A lot of people sort of believe that in order to attract the best deal flow, you have to be super nice. And I would actually contend that you just have to be really good. And really good sometimes means helping founders by telling like it is. Building a startup is extremely challenging. There's always sort of a number of roadblocks, and you never sort of grow this way. It always sort of goes like that. And so your role as a VC or as an angel is to really be helpful by pointing all the issues, mistakes, problems that the company might be facing or is facing and help solve them. So I tend to have a reputation to be pushy. It's because I try to really help our entrepreneurs on the, in the thick but also in the thin. And therefore, that's this reputation that helps us to get access to awesome deal flow. And I'm always humbled to see the number of founders we've passed on who send us awesome opportunities. So as you think about building your reputation, understand this is how good you are at helping your companies that will sort of matter, not how nice you've been. Because of the sheer number of funds, and by the way, if you're trying to raise a fund with limited partners like the ones we saw this morning, it's really important to have a clear differentiation and what makes you different from the rest of the ecosystem. Because of that number, 135. So we have actually a pretty broad strategy. We invest in number of different sectors. We do consumer, we do B2B, and so on and so forth. And it's OK because we've been around for a long time, and people can go back to our track record and portfolio and see the kinds of things we've done. As you guys start, it's very important to be very specific and to have that sort of what I call the shtick, whether it's investing very early stage, where today you could argue most of the so-called early stage investors need some initial proof points before investing. We certainly do. So if you do like my good friend Manu Kumar, who invests pretty much on founders and ideas, then you will have a differentiation. Likewise, focusing on a given sort of verticals, whether it's B2B marketplaces, geographies, would be actually sort of good. Or you do like McClure and you invest in a lot of companies. We talked about that with Elad. So this shtick, you actually apply it as an absolute filter. It's very important for you to be clear with the market what you do and what you won't do. And when it comes to us, we've actually come up with this sort of funny diagram that I invented, or at least the term, a smart-ass team building a kick-ass product in a big-ass market, which we call the 3 asses rule, is something which came up over a drink as I was at a conference with my good friend Rob Hayes. And he said, well, I'm looking for a smart-ass team in a big-ass market. A kick-ass team in a big-ass market. And I said, well, I'm French, or I used to be French, therefore I need a 3rd ass, and that became the awesome team building a differentiated product in a big market. And you sort of put that, and obviously you can ask Hugh McLeod to sort of do this awesome sort of drawing for you, and you put that out on your website, on your business cards, and in our case, in a book, the Do More Faster book, where we had an interesting sort of conversation with the editor because he wanted to replace ass with something else. And so what we want to answer yes to as investors is, do we really like those founders and do we see sort of a founder market fit for this particular opportunity? Do we believe that there is something behind that product that people will actually love and use or definitely find a lot of value using? And do you love this deal? Just to give you a sense, we see anywhere from 400 to 700 opportunities a quarter, and we invest in 4 or 5. So we're pretty concentrated in terms of portfolio construction, which means that only the deals that we're absolutely passionate about will get done. And therefore, we have to know ourselves whether we'll go to bat for that deal to make it happen. The one thing that we've added recently, because of the glut of seed financing that happens and the downstream need for Series A, is do we understand what it takes to actually get this opportunity funded by Series A investors 12 to 18 months down the road? And what are the hurdles that our entrepreneurs will need to actually sort of successfully clear to get that funding? this is something which is actually pretty hard. It's recognizing when something is really not meant for you. I talked about the founder market fit. It's basically understanding the intricacies of a specific opportunity or market, especially if it's sort of complex for legal or regulatory reasons, like an FDA-approved device. If you feel that the entrepreneurs don't know, or essentially don't know what they don't know, as in they don't understand those issues and so on and so forth, it's time for you to walk away. A good example I had many years ago, a few years ago, someone trying to build a startup facilitating contract manufacturing for hardware startups. As the whole sort of hardware world was exploding, I thought it was actually a good idea. And I said, who's your CM sort of specialist? And the CEO said, content management. And so that's just an example that showed that for someone who tried to facilitate that part of the equation, she was just not the right profile. And actually, the startup didn't really sort of fare that well. I learned that from my good friend and mentor, Brad Feld, where as you sort of spend time with founders, looking at the opportunity, get reference checks about the founders, talk to potential experts in the field, every bit of information that comes along should increase your excitement about the opportunity. And the challenge at seed stage, given the hyperactivity that we've seen, you have 2 to 3 days sometimes to make up your mind and go through your due diligence process to make a decision. But everything that you hear, learn, and discover about the opportunity has to get you even more excited. Otherwise, that's a pass sign. And finally, over time, and there is a wisdom that it takes 10 years to actually know what the fuck you're doing, and after 10 years, I guess it's kind of true, not sure whether I know what I'm doing, but I certainly know more than what I did 10 years ago. You have this sort of spidey sense that will sort of ring the alarm bells when you hear something, you see something, you just feel something. And every time I haven't listened to that spidey sense, I've lost everything. So even though at the beginning that spidey sense might go off a bit too often, it's okay to sort of, restrict yourself. That's something which is very true. Unique ideas no longer exist per se. Because of open innovation, because the richness of platforms that are available, the notion of, someone has this unique idea that is truly leveraging an opportunity and so on and so forth just doesn't exist. And we actually sort of have moved from the unique idea to someone who's executing better, faster, with a much bigger sort of objective and ambition. And what we've seen is when you have a good idea and everything goes on TechCrunch and so on and so forth, you will see competitors pop up within just a few weeks of you actually getting your product at the door, which speaks to sort of keeping it quiet for some time. And investors will definitely pile in and go behind it, because if you have sort of a cool startup which actually gets some traction and raises some funding from great firms, as opposed to saying, this happened, then investors will actually look for the number 2 or number 3 or number 10 in the food delivery space. How many companies do we need in food delivery? Turns out a lot, based on how many get funded. That means for investors that there's now a new sort of mechanic, which is you see a team that demonstrates an interesting opportunity and market and sort of way to address this opportunity, but you don't feel that the team is the right one. You can actually wait for the right team. And it's kind of amusing. We looked at something, so let's get the dates right. So I saw a team in a given opportunity on Tuesday, and I wasn't sort of convinced about the team. And then within literally 10 days, I've seen 2 more teams doing exactly the same thing with this slight different approach to marketing and so on and so forth. But truly, you can sort of almost sort of sit back and say, if I like the opportunity but not the team, I can actually wait. That one is painful. And it will happen to you. And you have to sort of face it. So what do those guys have in common besides being sort of unicorn, quasi-unicorns, or really good sort of outcomes? Yes, thank you. And there's LinkedIn, and there's Uber, and everything on that list. The point is, those, I passed on them because when I saw them, which was very early, Airbnb was actually airbed and breakfast. And you were getting an airbed when you went out of town, attend a conference. Awesome. The point is, those founders were awesome. Pinterest, Elad sort of mentioned that there was barely anyone sort of using Pinterest. However, Ben was compounding 30% month to month from 100 users. And when my friend Mariam sort of introduced me to Pinterest, she said, oh, my gals in the office are spending all their, half of their day on it. There's just awesome retention. But it was sort of not that great, and there was nobody using it. So it's sort of easy to brush off. And the point is, it's very hard as an investor who sees a ton of opportunities to really always keep an open mind on something that doesn't look that great, or I'm too busy, I'm looking at investing in some piece of shit that will just never go anywhere, and I'm missing one of those awesome unicorn sort of opportunities. And to this day, I'm still sort of making that mistake. So how do you avoid it? And if I can sort of give you sort of a sense is, look at who sent you the opportunity. And if ever that refer is truly legit, then just take the meeting. Don't say, I'm not sure, I'm not clear, whatever, just take it. Good example is my good friend and CEO, Kevin Hartz, who's one of the best angel investors while running Eventbrite. Anything is referred to me became something really interesting, and I didn't pay attention to his referral to House, which was a big mistake. So if someone you truly respect sends you a deal, take the fucking meeting. And yeah, I still make that mistake too often, and I still and I have to think about, oh yeah, good example, Sam Angus, who tried 3 times to get me to meet with Airbnb. Now every time he sends me a company, I go like, I'm not sure, oh, this is Sam, and I will take the meeting. Think value add when syndicating. So, okay, we get it. It's really busy out there. There are tons of sources of capital between the 135 micro VCs, the hundreds of angels on AngelList, and the thousands of retail investors who are going to try and get into those companies who essentially should only invest in the next fund that McClure is raising, of course. So capital is a real commodity, right? Is he here? Oops. So capital is really a commodity, and as an investor, what's going to make your sort of entry in a company possible is that value add that you're going to be sort of demonstrating. But you want to be surrounded by people who can also sort of add value. And so, sorry, someone is actually buzzing me. That's my wife. I'll take the call afterwards. So value add, whether it's in terms of expertise, experience, connections, brand, we brought some actors in some of our deals and ended up being useful. Why? Because they help with some connections and so forth. So having a sort of value add heavy sort of syndicate actually sort of works in favor of the company, and not only because of the value of the TechCrunch article. And the role of that syndicate at the beginning is really to try and help the company sort of fix some challenges and shortcomings, because let's face it, it's very early and therefore it's far from being complete. Party rounds is something that we've always stayed away from because by definition, a lot of investors put in a small amount of money and they don't care and they don't pay attention. And whenever the shit hits the fan, and it always does, founders say, hey, help, and no one is there. So those are sort of the worst constructs that you can come up with. Smart founders will essentially optimize for what I would call investor market fit. And investor market fit means you actually know what you're doing in a very specific, market and opportunity, but only do that if you have several options. Does that mean that I'm done? Pretty much? Okay, sorry. So founder accountability is key. I'm going to go fast. That's sort of the same thing I mentioned. Too often, investors want to be nice to founders, and they don't keep them accountable. That's a big mistake, because at the early stage, when something sort of starts veering off the plan that has been agreed upon, it's often too late to react unless you sort of catch it right there and then. So agree very early on some kind of reporting schedule, very simple, one-sheet template, could be every couple of weeks, could be every month. And that's the kinds of things that you will cover in it. But the point is, you will sort of see whether the company is executing on the plan that you guys have agreed. And it's really important if you have a structure where there's no board, so it's not one person's responsibility to actually do it, it's just left to the investor syndicate, and the founder are first-timers. Big risk there. As I said, it's too late once you know there is something going on. Series A crunch, essentially, beating the Series A crunch is not that difficult. Just do a good job at pre-selling the opportunities, hang out with investors early so that whenever the company needs to go and raise money, it's not a cold start. There are already sort of conversations sort of going on. We've pretty successfully sort of done that. And yeah, short runways are very challenging. So even the great startup with great founders will need at least 18 months. Don't try for reasons of limiting dilution, to cut your runway short because you want to only raise, $1 million as opposed to $1.5 million. And that's just for you guys, fund managers. Do put your fees in the ground, because otherwise your hurdle, which is you need to deliver 4x net to your LPs, if ever you don't recycle 25% of your fees, your requirement in terms of performance will go up to 5.5. So, which is actually really hard when you think about it and you compound, the performance. So think about that. And yeah, one bonus, without systems, there are too many companies, so you will drown. So think about, so this is what we're using. Having good systems will actually make you very effective. And yeah, if I could write to myself, that's what I would say. Thank you. Oh. Yeah, I've always wanted to do this, so sorry, I have to. So I'm just using the fact that I'm here to hijack the scene and announce the close of SoftTech 4. So $85 million. Very happy with that. So we'll do 50 deals over 3 years, $500,000, $2 million plus. So that's sort of the math. $50 million. So heavy reserves. What did I say? Very important reserves. And those are the geos where we invest, target ownership. And those are the sectors. And yeah, we'll play with Bitcoin, drones, digital health, and virtual reality and glasses as sort of new areas, but the rest will be standard sort of soft tech investment sectors. And this is the new footprint with Fund 4 that we start investing. And this